Morning and welcome to Breaking Points. You just got a lonely studio camera shot. That's because Ryan is traveling today, so I'm very happy to be joined by the one and only Krystal Ball. Krystal, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going great, but we were just talking before the camera started rolling that actually it doesn't seem to be going well for literally anyone in the country right now, because we're about to talk about how Democrats are furious with Chuck Schumer. And Republicans maybe are getting increasingly impatient with the Trump administration on a couple of different fronts. We're going to break that down. Might have something to do with the jobs numbers we're going to cover in the show as well. But we're going to be starting with the shutdown, which is set to end with a House vote today. Obviously, the shutdown has Democrats enormously frustrated with Chuck Schumer and party leadership. Actually, even party leadership like Hakeem Jeffries is reportedly annoyed with Chuck Schumer. So whether Chuck Schumer can withstand this wave in future leadership votes, that's going to be a serious question on the table going forward. Krystal, we've got some jobs numbers from ADP because the government's not putting them out, don't we?
Yeah, so those numbers have become increasingly important, the ones that are put out by private outfits like ADP. So we'll take a look at those. Not looking great in terms of the economy, not feeling that golden age so much. I think most of America also not feeling that golden age, and that is fueling some of the MAGA revolt, the early stage signs of MAGA revolt as well. We have some indications ICE might be leaving Chicago, and also DHS is going after me. So that's a fun one. Ben Shapiro has thoughts on affordability, and you have thoughts on Ben Shapiro's thoughts, and I have thoughts on your thoughts on Ben Shapiro's thoughts. So we'll get that one. And then, of course, since it's a ladies show, or a hoe show, as we like to call it, we had to dig into this trend of Mar-a-Lago face. So DC plastic surgeons are saying that more and more people, men and women, by the way, this is equal opportunity, are coming in looking for a look where it like used to be the thing that if you got work done, you didn't really want people to notice. You wanted to look natural. They're overtly like, no. I want people to know that I got massive amounts of things injected into my face. And like, I want that to be advertised. So it's an interesting trend. Like, it's very actually fascinating development.
I like how you said we're going to dig into it. We read a story about it, and we're going to talk about the story. the Breaking Points investigative journalism.
That's mostly what we do on the show, yeah.
But I love the idea of the shoe leather.
I actually have been doing some of my own journalistic observations on this as well. So, I'm not just going to go by what was put in the story. That's just an excuse to talk about something I've actually been thinking about for a while.
It's going to be good. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And Katie Wilson, right? Krystal, we have an interview towards the end of today's show.
Yeah, so I recorded this with her yesterday at a time when, so this is the sort of progressive insurgent candidate for mayor in the city of Seattle. When I talked to her yesterday, she was up in the vote count by 91 votes.
Oh my gosh.
91 votes. Now we've had another mail ballot drop yesterday evening after I spoke with her. She's now up by, I think, between like 1,000 and 2,000 votes. And the later mail that's coming in now, because Washington state voters, all of the voting is actually cast by mail, and the later ballots tend to be more progressive, younger voters who wait to the last minute. So as those drops have come in, she's taken more and more of a lead. So it is now like pretty fully assumed she's going to be the next mayor of Seattle. And it's really quite fascinating because Seattle, obviously, is a progressive city. And they, prior to leading into 2020, they had quite a progressive city council. Then you had 2020, you had Black Lives Matter. Seattle was a really focal point there. You also have issues with homelessness, rising crime, coming out of COVID, all of that. So there was some backlash elections that led to some more sort of centrist candidates, right wing in the context of Seattle, being put on the city council and also in the mayor's office. So with Katie Wilson's apparent victory here, it really sort of sweeps that slate of more centrist candidates out of office and brings back more progressives. And in fact, Katie, I think, is one of the more progressive people to ever hold the office of the mayoralty. Just as one little tease for the interview, which I really think you guys will, I think you'll enjoy. I think you'll, it was very interesting speaking with her and her perspective on what it would take for her to deliver in that office. And she said, look, I think I'm going to be judged by improvements in quality of living, in reducing chronic homelessness, and in public safety. So that was very much her focus, and looks like the message that she brought won the day there. So excited to share that interview with you guys today.
Yeah, looking forward to that, Krystal. Make sure you go to breakingpoints.com to sign up for a premium subscription to the show. If you haven't done that yet, you get the show early and also access to the second half of the Friday shows, which, Krystal, they've been pretty lit, I have to say, recently. Like, they've been
If you're not getting the
fiery.
second half of the Friday show, you're missing some of the best content of the week. There's no doubt about it.
That's for sure.
Ryan unleashed in the second half of the Friday shows. That's
Grim
what you're missing.
Unfiltered. Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and start with the shutdown potentially coming to an end today. So the House of Representatives was going to vote on that bill where Senate Democrats joined with Senate Republicans to pass the continuing resolution to fund the government. That has the left, as Krystal is going to walk us through, absolutely furious with Senate Democratic leadership. Chuck Schumer, in particular, is understandably bearing the brunt of the backlash. Jon Stewart addressed this on his show. Let's go ahead and take a look here at A0.
Tonight's show will be brought to you by I Can't F***ing Believe It.
It's literally life or death. So Democrats have 3 words for this. No f***ing way.
Excuse me? Cave on the shutdown? Huh? Not this forceful, young, authentic Democratic Party that hangs out down by the river. Democrats, you sold out the entire shutdown not to get what you wanted, but for a promise to not get what you wanted later. Where in the art of war? Hold on.
Krystal, this has, I mean, the criticisms of Chuck Schumer are just blanketing American airwaves. It's like impossible to get away from. We actually have some more to show folks, but quick reaction there to Jon Stewart. No real surprise.
Yeah, no. And I mean, what he's saying is, he puts it in a comedic way, but it's incredibly obvious. You did the longest shutdown in history to get literally nothing right after you had some of the most decisive electoral results that I've seen in my lifetime. What are we doing here? And so, yeah, I mean, the insanity of it is obvious on its face. And one quick note before we play Harry Enton talking about Chuck Schumer's numbers and how historically unpopular he is with his own party. They're trying to sell, and Schumer's, I'm sure, staffers were leaking to the press like, oh no, he didn't want the shutdown and he was totally in it for the fight. And I think it's a sign of how it is a different day in the Democratic Party and with the Democratic base, that Democratic base voters were like, that's bullshit. Like, we're not stupid. We know that this deal was at least tacitly supported by leadership. Your number 2 guy, Dick Durbin, literally voted for it. So they're not going to be snowed by these nonsense talking points. And this is really the sort of crystallization. I hate using that word because of my name, but whatever. It's the crystallization of the boiling rage that has really been simmering with the Democratic base during Trump 2.0 in general, where they have felt that Democratic leadership is weak. They have felt they don't know how to fight. They have felt they don't understand the moment. You know, there was a lot of disappointment, sense of betrayal when they just didn't even bother to try to use the leverage they had earlier during the administration. You know, they've been very, they told Jasmine Crockett basically to like sit down and shut up and stop being so outspoken. They've been extremely reluctant to go after Trump on immigration abuses and ICE and National Guard abuses in cities. They've just been incredibly lame, cringe, and tepid. And the Democratic base is done with it. So, that's really, and to connect this to, Zoran's win and what's going on in Maine with Graham Plattner and, the types of candidates that are succeeding right now, like there is a sense, I think, an accurate sense from Democratic leadership. They have lost control of the base of the party in a way that we've really never seen before. Previously, if they said, oh, it wasn't us, it was it was the Republicans. It was these few rogue bad senators like Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema, the base largely bought that. Those days are over, which is why you now see this historic unpopularity for Chuck Schumer. Let's go ahead and play CNN's analysis on that front.
least popular Dem Senate leader ever. I looked at all of the polls going all the way back since 1985. The one who has the lowest rating among Democrats is, in fact, Chuck Schumer. Look at this. He's underwater with Democrats. His own party, he's underwater. He's at -4 points. That makes him the least popular guy for a Dem Senate leader going all the way back since the mid-1980s at least. Dems in Congress do too little to oppose Trump. During the first term, it was just 46% in 2017. That's the percentage of Democrats who said that the Dems in Congress are doing too little to oppose Donald Trump. Look at where we are now, 69%. That is an increase of, get this, 23 points. The super duper majority of Democrats believe that the Democrats in Congress are not doing enough to oppose Donald Trump. And that, of course, is a big, huge criticism of Chuck Schumer. And that is why he is underwater. But of course, the ultimate way to get Chuck Schumer out of office is to beat him in New York State. So how do New York State Democrats feel about Chuck Schumer? And take a look here. The net favorable among New York Democrats. Chuck Schumer is above water with the Democrats in his home state, but just by 16 points. Look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running way ahead. If she decides to challenge Chuck Schumer and come 2028, she's got a real leg up on the competition. I dare say at this point she would be the favorite to beat him, which would be something that would just blow my mind, even just a few years ago, given that Chuck Schumer, of course, is a New York born and bred type of guy.
So, Krystal, there's something poetic about
I think if
this.
AOC runs against him, it's over. Like, she would destroy him. I don't even think it would be close at this point, you know?
I was going to ask you that. And when I look at this, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries were persuaded into this shutdown because they're actually trying to do what Nancy Pelosi sort of successfully did in Trump 1.0, which is kind of put the lid on the simmering pot of populist anger. It's not even just populist anger. It's like anger across the board among average Democrats and people in their own caucus. And that's what they were trying to do here. They were trying to head off the potential problem of a revolt and give the base what they wanted so that they would kind of calm their criticism. And the poetry of it is that as the shutdown ends, Chuck Schumer is in more trouble. He's in more trouble now than when it started. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious at this point that the leadership unsuccessfully tried to stave off the revolt by going into the shutdown, and by then ending the shutdown a week after those election wins in particular, with no real commitment from Republicans on a real problem for Republicans, by the way, which is heading into a midterm year, having many people's premiums spike with the expiration of those Biden-era credits. They got nothing out of it. They got some fundraising out of it. I'm sure they got some energy from organizing and all of that out of it, sure. But people wanted a whole lot more. And now, rather than staving that off, it's stoked the fire even more.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, I mean, Dem Tea Party is fully here. And I'm going to make a prediction. There are going to be some Democratic incumbents who are primaried who lose to random, in their view, nobodies who have never held political office, never been in the political fray. You're going to see some come out of nowhere surprises from just everyday people who are disgusted with the failures of Democratic leadership. And, one thing I was thinking about, because it doesn't appear that Chuck Schumer's leadership role is going to be threatened in any way by the elected Democrats at this point. You have had a number of people in the House, led by Ro Khanna, kudos to him for understanding the moment, who have come out and said Schumer should go. Not a single Democratic senator, though, to include Bernie Sanders, who got asked about it and was basically like, yeah, well, what are you going to do? This is just how it is. So I don't see Democratic electeds in the Senate making any moves to toss him out of leadership. However, I think it comes in part from, their comfort with the status quo, whatever. I also think it comes in part from an old-fashioned view of what Senate or House leadership should be. So sort of the classic role is this very insider role, right? You're fundraising, you're handling the legislative, the strategy, and you're helping to whip votes. That's, this sort of internal role. And the frustration with the Democratic base is they want Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate to be leading a public effort, a public fight. They want them to be sort of activist leaders in the streets fighting in a visible way. And Summer Lee made a comment to this effect when I spoke with her last week, when I interviewed her last week. She was like, they need to understand that we need a new model of leadership that is in touch with the grassroots base, that is leading the charge in terms of, movements and activism on the ground. And so I don't think that, a lot of the senators in the Democratic caucus, many of whom are old, including Bernie, who's, quite elderly at this point, I don't think they really understand why people are so frustrated in the role they actually want a Chuck Schumer to be able to fill. Because if you're a Democratic senator, with that traditional status quo model, you're like, well, he fundraises well and he does okay in the legislative whatever. And the base is like, but we don't care about that. That is not what we want to see. We want to see you guys fighting. And if you have appointed someone, you're claiming this person is a leader, we want to see them actually leading. So I think that's part of the disconnect between where the people are and where the Democratic Party electeds are. And the other thing I would say, and this has been abundantly clear for a while, something we've been talking about for a while, the Democratic Party has a democracy problem. They do not feel that they need to listen to their voters at all. If anything, their instinct is always to go against their voters, especially if you're talking about the progressive wing. But now you have basically the entirety of the base that is increasingly sort of radicalized, increasingly aligned very closely with the progressive wing of the party. And so they're still in this outdated model of we always got to punch left. And if it's something that, that our progressives want, then it has to be something that we oppose. But what do you do when it's not just the progressives, it's the whole party that is you guys are screwing up big time?
Well, yeah, and this is where Chuck Schumer could actually be in trouble, is when you have Graham Plattner and a new generation coming in. If that happens on a populist wave, that's basically what ended up pushing, John Boehner and Paul Ryan ultimately. And then I guess ultimately you could argue Kevin McCarthy as well out of office. But let's roll this clip, because I think to the point you just made, Krystal, if you are Chuck Schumer, you should take a look at, or you're at the DNC or the DSC, you should take a look at this clip of John Fetterman getting grilled by Sunny Hostin of The View, who I joked yesterday is going full Jennifer Welch here about the shutdown. This is A3.
Democrats had big wins last week, so you had momentum. Why give in now? Why bring a butter knife to a gunfight? Are you willing to gamble that the GOP will negotiate on health care in good faith once the government reopens? Because if that gamble is wrong, 500,000 Pennsylvanians that you represent, their health care costs will skyrocket if you are wrong. And I believe you are wrong.
Well, first of all, MTG is quite literally the last person in America that I'm going to take advice or to get their kinds of my leadership and values from. And now if Democrats are celebrating crazy pants like that, then that's on them. And now I don't need a lecture. I don't need a lecture from whether it's Bernie or the governor in California, because they are representing very deep blue kinds of populations. I promise you, this isn't a political game. It is viewed by many of us, but the reality is 42 million Americans now not sure where their next meal is going to come from. And because we vote like that. Or people that haven't been paid for 5 weeks now, and that kinds of chaos. Those workers have to borrow more than $500 million, from their credit union just to pay their bills now. So for me, we're in the middle of this.
Senator, I got it.
When you've lost the view, Krystal. But actually, and seriously, the view is sort of, I don't know the best way to describe it, but maybe center left is one way. They're just kind of the most moderate Democrat. That's probably a suburban, moderate, affluent Democrat viewership. And if that's what you're seeing, if that's what the kind of average suburban leans left mom is watching in the middle of the day, fiery rants at John Fetterman, Chuck Schumer is seriously in trouble, and the Democratic establishment is seriously in trouble.
I think it's the beginning of the end for Schumer. I don't know if it'll be in a primary in 2028. To be honest with you, I think if AOC jumps in that primary fight, I don't even know if he may just retire because it would be embarrassing, obviously, to lose to her. And I think
you'd
the writing
think that
is on
about
the
Andrew
wall.
Cuomo, and you'd think that about Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, he just seems to have a humiliation fetish. So that's a different psychology that we'll have to analyze there. But in any case, with Schumer, assuming he doesn't have a humiliation fetish, which, we don't know yet. But I think certainly AOC would take him out in a primary. And there's probably other New York State candidates who could easily take him out in a primary as well. She's just the best known and the one that people love to analyze. And I think she's certainly thinking about it. Indications are she and her team are debating, do I run against Schumer or do I actually run for president? And I don't think that they've come to a decision in that regard. Personally, I think she'd be a fantastic senator from New York. And again, it would be a cakewalk to defeat him if he even bothers to try. And then, in terms of the next leadership elections, you are going to have a real revolt on your hands. There is going to be mass pressure put on these Democratic senators to go in a different direction. And, on MSNBC, I've been watching it some these past couple of days because it's been kind of interesting to see where they land. And the vast majority of them are furious as well. They are disgusted. They are shocked that that they caved at this moment. I talked yesterday about how Rachel Maddow did her whole opening rant on guys, we just had the No Kings protest, the largest action literally in history. You had these election results and now is the time you cave when you literally got nothing for it. What the hell? And I don't know that I've ever really seen her criticize the Democratic Party, certainly not in that forceful or forthright a way. She's one to sort of hint in a direction, but not fully take a stand somewhere. Here she was taking a stand and then she had Bernie Sanders on as her guest to back it up. But there was one MSNBC host, Lawrence O'Donnell, who comes on right after Rachel Maddow, who did actually defend Chuck Schumer. A
lonely voice crying out in the wilderness.
Very courageous of him at this point, actually, in a certain way.
Truly,
it is.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and take a listen to the case that he was making for Schumer. This is A4.
It might be easy to criticize Chuck Schumer. It is easy to criticize Chuck Schumer. It's easy to make fun of him. You can wish he were smoother. You can wish he had all the smoothness of Barack Obama. It's easy to criticize him, but it is not easy to replace him. It might be easy to call for his resignation, but it is not easy to say who, with a name, could do a better job.
It actually is easy to say that. I would say Chris Van Hollen or Chris Murphy, either one of them would do a better job. I mean, Chris Van Hollen has really, he in a certain way is this kind of unifying figure because he's this very mainstream Democrat, in the firmament of the establishment of the party. But he also was quite courageous and clever too, by the way, and creative when it came to Kilmar Abrego Garcia and leading the charge there when it's come to Gaza. And, going there and looking at, okay, they're lying when they say that that the problem for aid distribution is the UN. The problem is the Israelis. And he's been very, he's been very outspoken in that regard. And I think has earned a lot of respect from progressives and liberals who see him as someone who has stood up against the Trump administration. But, he's going to be able to do the fundraising and do the party insider stuff as well. So personally, I think he would be a fantastic choice. Now, he's another one who may be sniffing around at potentially running for president. I believe he had either a New Hampshire or an Iowa trip or something in that regard. In my opinion, he's the type, he's not like a super charismatic figure, but he seems to be clever and principled and have some decent strategic instincts. So to me, that would be, his best use would be in something like leadership in the Senate. So the idea that Chuck Schumer, it's just farcical on its face that Chuck Schumer is so exceptional. How could we possibly replace him? It's literally what planet do you live on? I could pick a random person off of the street and I think they would do a better job at this point with the role of leadership that the base actually wants their party leaders to serve at this point.
Well, right. And part of I'm just, again, thinking back to Tea Party shutdowns. Leadership never really wanted Tea Party shutdowns. Like, they were dragged into it by Ted Cruz and whomever else, but they didn't have all those like specific attainable goals outlined in a lot of cases. It was kind of just for the purpose of causing trouble and getting, like, throwing a wrench into the gear of Washington. And what's interesting about this is Democrats created a pretty specific benchmark that they wanted to achieve with the shutdown, which was healthcare. And there's nothing that Democrats have more of an upper hand on than healthcare, because Republicans have nothing. In terms of what is Mike Johnson saying right now? Like, we have notebooks full of plans or something like that.
Yeah.
They got nothing. And after all of that,
Concepts of a plan, right?
Yeah, concepts of a plan. After all of that, they get, like, when you set that specific of a benchmark and you walk away, like, for really the timing makes no sense. It's not as though, the credits were on the table. Again, it's not until the end of the year. They expire at the end of the year. That's why this is coming up right now. So it's not like it was within a couple of days or anything like that. Speaking of the timing, let's try to figure out what it might have been, because The Lever has some reporting about the airline industry, which has swamped Washington, D.C. over the last couple of weeks. The next element up on the screen. Just going to town lobbying people. And this was a report in The Lever that found correlation between airlines' favorite Democrats and who voted to end the shutdown. Krystal and Politico Influence had a great report last week as well about the airline industry. Just as soon as Duffy announced the flight reductions or requested the flight reductions, that sent the lobbyists for the airline industry into overdrive. And I think that probably is as good of an explanation as any for why they voted pretty randomly on Sunday. I mean, it seemed as though even Democratic insiders were surprised, maybe not Schumer himself, but it didn't seem like anyone actually realized this was about to be on the brink of Dems siding with Republicans, and that's exactly what happened. Seems like maybe it was the airlines.
I mean, people forget how powerful the airline lobby is in DC. Anytime, remember during COVID, like, they always got their custom bailouts. They're always in the ear of legislators. And then what Sirota and his team at The Lever did is just to literally look at, okay, let's take a look at the FEC contributions. Let's pull up the history. And lo and behold, 7 out of the 8 of them in particular have taken large sums from the industry, which means that you're going to be in constant communication with them. And then one in particular, Jackie Rosen of Nevada, was one of the largest recipients of airline lobby cash. So there's no doubt that money is influential, impactful in terms of their thinking. The other thing that I've been pointing to that I really think it's important for people to keep in mind is Trump's threat to nuke the filibuster. Republicans hated that. But these type of corporate Democrats also hate that, because even if they've publicly claimed they want to get rid of the filibuster, the truth of the matter is they love having an excuse for why they can't deliver. And the filibuster is the best excuse they've ever had. It is, in a sense, existential for them in order to maintain this pretense that they would love to deliver for working people. They would love to deliver for Americans, but they just can't because of this terrible rule called the filibuster. And therefore, we can never actually achieve the things that we totally promise you we actually want to achieve. So I think that was the other piece, because that likely was the other way that this ends, where Trump puts enough pressure on the Republicans where it's like, no, you are going to get rid of the filibuster. They cave to Trump and nuke the filibuster. And in my opinion, that's a better outcome. And in my opinion, and I think the base of the Democratic Party would have accepted that too, because then it's like, okay, you fought, you did everything you could. And even if they ended up with nothing on healthcare, it's like, you took it as far as you possibly could. You did not give up the fight. And you pressed the case, you put healthcare on the table, you really put the Republicans in a difficult spot. And now the filibuster is gone. And guess what? If Democrats take back power, which is increasingly possible, at least in the Senate in the next elections, then you're going to be able to pass some of your priorities that in the past you've always said you could never achieve. You could get Puerto Rico as a state. You could get DC as a state. You could pack the Supreme Court. You could pass legislation that actually will benefit working people. So I think that filibuster threat is another thing that freaked them out, because these corporate type Democrats need that, existentially need that as their excuse for why they can never actually really do anything big with the power that they have.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly right. I think because, what's made me come around on the filibuster even recently, I always kind of go back and forth on the filibuster, but what's made me come around on it recently is that it's actually healthy for the country to see more direct consequences of our votes. And I don't mean consequences in a negative way, but actually, it could be positive, could be negative, that when you vote on something, you see it happen. The filibuster is not like in the Constitution. It's not like part of the system that the framers designed. And so if you have a majority of the House and the Senate and a president to sign a piece of legislation, then the country feels what they voted for, as opposed to, feeling that like constantly getting thwarted. Now, there are a lot of other things that I would, do in addition to nuking the filibuster to make sure that the country was running, if I could wave my magic wand in a way that I think made sense and was helpful. But that one in particular, that means people would actually have to face votes. So they would have to face votes on the floor of the Senate. The senators would have to face votes on the floor of the Senate for things that they said they would support, Medicare for All being a pretty obvious example. And then they would have to face votes from their voters who say, you told us you were going to vote for, John McCain is the best example. You told us you were going to repeal and replace how many times? And then you voted no on the repeal and replace? Those actually having those votes and actually seeing feeling more, putting less of a buffer between what people vote for and what the country looks like is probably helpful at this point, Krystal.
I agree completely. And the other piece is, because you have a legislature that really is not interested in governing, that has helped to create the dynamic of an executive branch that just then does everything. Yep. And so it creates, Trump is responsible for, the consolidation of power and the insane ways that he uses and abuses his power. But one of the things that sort of greases the skids in that direction is if you have a filibuster that makes it impossible for Congress to do anything, then increasingly you have presidents reaching for the pen, using executive power, and Congress just sort of like, they just cede their power completely to the president, and they're happy
they're happy
to not have any actual legislative responsibility. That's easier for them. That's more comfortable for them. Yeah. So I do think the filibuster has sort of been an under discussed part of why this thing came to an end the way that it, in my opinion, ridiculous and pathetic way that it ultimately did.
Gang of 8, then you have Obama doing DACA with executive order. It happens all of the time, and the senators then can escape the backlash. So we may have gotten something good out of it if Dems had continued to hold out. Maybe Trump would have had them nuke the filibuster. I don't know. I'm skeptical. Senate Republicans were so averse to that for the reasons we just discussed.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.